This is the first video in a series of videos I'm going to be doing on continuous integration using Polymer. The first 3 videos in the series are going to be focused on the continuous integration environments we're going to be using. The first video will be focused on TravisCI, the second video on CodeShip, and the third video on the continuous integration portion of GitLabs. In these 3 videos, we'll be using a Polymer 2 element and we'll be running our linting rules as well as our local testing rules. Later in the series, we'll add sauce labs to our testing framework for our elements, and then we'll extend our configurations to support Polymer 2 applications as well. The first thing that I always do is set up a series of scripts in my package.json to alias the commands that I'm going to be using within my element. The package.json file isn't actually needed here, as you can write out each of these commands yourself in the command line if you would prefer. It's just a little more convenient. We'll be using these commands on the CI servers. If you prefer not to use them, you just need to replace the command references in your configuration files with the commands shown here. My scripts are really broken into 2 segments, my linting and my testing. For the linting case, I want to check all of my JavaScript and HTML files for linting errors using ESLint. Then I want to run it through the Polymer linter to check for lint issues with Polymer. For the testing portion, I have a default test command which will run all of my local tests, and then an extension of that which will run all of my sauce labs tests. We'll be talking more about the sauce labs portion in a later video in the series though. The next file we're going to take a look at is the WCT.conf.json, which is configuration for the web component tester that we're going to be using for the test commands. You'll see here I've got browsers set up for my local testing for Chrome and Firefox, and I explicitly want to run them both in headless. At the bottom you can see the sauce labs configuration. We'll go in depth into that in a later video, but for now we just want to make sure that it's disabled so it doesn't run by default unless it's called explicitly. The final configuration file we need to take a look at in the case of Travis is the .travis.yml file. This is the configuration file for Travis that tells the server what it needs to do whenever our repository updates. The first section is going to set up our environment. It's going to tell it to use the stable version of Node.js. We're going to set sudo to false so that we're using everything as user and not root. We're going to add the 2 browsers that we're going to be testing in locally, and we're going to tell it to use the trusty distribution of Linux. The next section is telling Travis how to handle our element, and by default Travis is set to use 2 build stages, install and script. Along with these stages, we have a before install, a before script, and after script that we can utilize to run additional commands between these 2 stages. For our install stage, we need to install our global tools, Bower and Polymer CLI, and then install our local dependencies using the npx command for Polymer install. You can also include the -- variance flag here if you're building a hybrid element. If our application is able to install, the next step we'll do is try to install the dependencies for ESLint as well as all of its plugins and then run our linter. If we make it past our linting, the next step is to run our tests. So we'll use the npm run test command, and then we have an if statement in here that checks to see if our branch is on master and we're not in the case of a pull request, and then it also runs our sauce labs configuration. For now you can just omit that, and we'll talk about it more in a later video. This last section is a preference, and I like to set my email notifications to where it never emails me on a successful build and always emails me if a build fails. Now that our repository contains all of the required configuration files, we need to head over to the TravisCI dashboard. From here you can click on the profile information in the top right corner and it'll navigate you to the section for setting up your repositories. From here you can use the sync account button to ensure that all of your repositories are listed below if they're not there already, and then you can use the filter repositories to jump to the one you want. Once you've found your repository, you just need to make sure that the toggle on the left side is set to true, and then you can click the name or the gear icon to go to the settings section. Now that we're on the settings page for our repository, we have access to different information about our build processes that have happened so far, as well as configuring the build process itself. To start things off, we're going to go ahead and grab the build badge that we can add to our README for our element to show what state our build is currently in. To do this, you just need to click on the build badge near the name of your repository to launch the configuration modal. There's a few different configuration options you can go through, but the important one for us is to set it to Markdown so it shows up in our README file. Once this is done, you just need to copy the snippet below and add it to the top of your readme.md and you're good to go. Now we can back out of that modal and go to the More Options section and choose Settings from the dropdown. This is where we tell Travis what actions in our repository should trigger our continuous integration to run. The first thing we want to do is set it up so that it only runs the build if the Travis YAML file exists. This in conjunction with build checks on your Git repository will prevent people from accidentally deleting your Travis.yaml file and being able to merge their pull requests. Next, we need to make sure that our builds run every time a new commit is pushed to a branch. I like to run my continuous integration every time a new commit is pushed to any branch instead of just branches that are set up for pull requests, but if you prefer, you can set up for pull requests instead by toggling the option below the branch ones. I recommend only choosing one, otherwise you'll end up with double builds, but you can use both and it won't cause any issues. Next, you can set up auto canceling of your builds if you choose to. This will allow you to have only one build running, so if a new commit is pushed before the previous build is finished, it'll go ahead and cancel out the previous build. That's all there is to it. So now your Polymer 2 element should be running continuous integration, and it should lint and run the Polymer tests every single time a commit is pushed to any branch on your repository. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and again, just as a reminder, I'll be going into multiple parts in this video, so we'll be following up with code ship and how to do Git labs for continuous integration as well. As always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them here on YouTube in the comments section, or you can find me in the Polymer Slack channel at @Murdoch.